Etobicoke-Lakeshore EDA board member, Mr. Geoff Turner. Geoff, take it away.
All right, well, thanks very much, Travis. And welcome everybody to this Conservative Party Leadership Forum focused on Toronto urban issues. My name is Geoff Turner and I'll be your moderator this evening. So hello to our viewers from Etobicoke and the wider GTA, and an especially warm welcome to our Conservative Party leadership candidates with us tonight, Dr. Leslyn Lewis, Mr. Aaron O'Toole, and Mr. Derek Sloan. Unfortunately, our fourth leadership candidate, Mr. Peter MacKay, will not be joining us this evening. Our candidates will be introducing themselves in a few minutes, but first, let me express our appreciation to all of you for putting your names forward in service to the Conservative Party movement at this challenging moment in our country's history when we really need strong leadership. Now, let's touch on some administrative matters. First of all viewers should remain permanently muted and camera disabled so that we don't interrupt our speakers. You will see some buttons at the bottom of your screen. Stop video and mute. You should have those buttons pushed so that you have no video and so that you are fully muted at all times. We're also recommending, as Travis indicated, that you use the active speaker view through the toggle on the top right of your screen. Now, second, I'd like to acknowledge the hard work of our Etobicoke-Lakeshore EDA executive to organize this event, and especially Indira Baines and Elizabeth Hoyle, who've been the principal drivers. And we're grateful for the help we've had from our neighboring EDAs. I'm also on the Etobicoke-Lakeshore EDA board with Indira and Elizabeth. I'm independent of any of the leadership campaigns. In my day job, I'm a tax lawyer at a Toronto law firm, and I teach the corporate tax course at Osgoode Hall Law School. And you can get the sense of some of the chaos I'm seeing on the screen right now. This is a humble grassroots event, and we really do hope that it goes smoothly. To help us on the technical matters, we've got Travis. You heard him at the beginning of this. He's running the call behind the scenes, and he's got control of the audio and video in case anyone forgets to mute themselves. All right, now last week, our candidates went head-to-head in two spirited national debates. So you may ask, why are we having this session tonight, and how will it differ from the national debates? Well, there are two big differences. So first, tonight we're going to ask our candidates to focus on 6 urban issues of particular interest to Toronto voters. So why urban issues? Well, we know our party did not win enough seats in the GTA last election. So we decided to organize this event to focus our candidates on GTA issues and hopefully improve our chances of success in the next election. We asked our members in Etobicoke what questions we should put to our candidates this evening. We collected all of these suggestions, we took into account the topics addressed at the last week's debates, and then we pruned the list down to the 6 topics that we're going to discuss tonight. We sent these topics to the candidates over the weekend, so they've had several days to consider their responses. The second difference from the national debates is our format. So this is not going to be a free-for-all debate. With the video conferencing limitations, we're not going to have our candidates go head-to-head. And we're not going to allow interjections or interruptions. Instead, we expect to have an orderly discussion of our 6 urban topics where each candidate has up to 3 minutes to present their response to the particular question. We're hoping that 3 minutes allows our candidates to discuss these topics in a bit of a less rushed pace. So we're trying to foster a somewhat deeper, non-adversarial policy discussion here. We've also randomly assigned the speaking order, as is customary. So we're going to start off with each candidate's introductory opening statement of 1 minute each, and then we'll move on to the 6 rounds of questions with 3-minute responses from each candidate. So all of this should take about an hour and 15 minutes or so. So we should end around 8:15, and in any event before our originally scheduled end time of 8:30. To help our candidates stick to the time limits, I will be flashing this yellow card on screen. This is indicating 20 seconds are left. You get the sense of the humble grassroots nature of our presentation tonight. And this red card would indicate time's up. I'm hoping our candidates will be able to see that. And if not, I will gently interject to indicate that time is up. Ultimately, of course, Travis can mute our candidates if they go over, but we don't want to go there. And lastly, There's a little red dot at the top right of your screen. That shows that our event is being recorded. So we're going to make the recording link available on our EDA websites. It might take a day or two to pop up after the event. So finally, with all of that background, it's time to turn it over to our candidates for their 1-minute introductory closing statements, opening statements rather. Our order for the introductions will be alphabetical. So first, Dr. Lewis, over to you. You have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Canada is at a crossroads. If the Liberals win the next election, it will be decades before we can recover. We need the right leader with the right time. We need a leader that's going to be able to withstand the Liberal lies and attacks about who we are as Canadians. We're a good people. We need a leader who will listen to the grassroots of our party and who will believe that they can expand the big blue tent. We need a leader with courage, compassion, and common sense. The courage to stand up to Trudeau and to defend what is right over what is easy. The compassion to have policies that will uplift our entire nation and not just a select few. And a leader with good fiscal common sense policies. I have run my campaign based on these principles of courage, compassion, and common sense. And with your support, that is exactly how I will run this party and this nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lewis. Our next candidate is Mr. O'Toole for your 1-minute opening statement. Over to you, Mr. O'Toole.
Well, thank you, Geoff and Etobicoke-Lakeshore and all of you for being part of this debate, and Derek and Leslyn as well for being a part of it. 5 years ago, when I was in the cabinet of Stephen Harper, we had a balanced budget. We had job creation. We had the best economic record in the G7. The Bloc Québécois was a non-official party, and there was nothing called the Wexit movement. Our country is weaker, poorer, and more divided after 5 years of Justin Trudeau. That's why I launched my campaign in Calgary as a GTA MP to start healing the rifts and getting Canada back to work. It is time after the pandemic and after deficit spending and ideological government from Justin Trudeau to take back Canada. I've won 3 times in the GTA by defending our conservative principles. As a veteran, as someone in the business community, as a former cabinet minister, I've won before in our region. I can win again. Help me take back our country.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Toole. And now, Mr. Sloan, over to you for your 1-minute introductory statement.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here tonight. This race is more than a vote on who should be leader. It is a referendum on the direction of the party, and by extension, the direction of the country. Conservatives, we all would agree, need to win, but not just once. We need to be the dominant political force in this country. The only way to do that is to campaign as if the soul of the nation is at stake, not just its pocketbook. We can't be afraid to address controversial issues. The Liberals traffic in controversy, and if we don't go toe-to-toe with them on their ideas, we will never win. The Liberals always double down on extremes. They double down on the status quo for abortion, which gives Canada the distinction of being the only Western nation with no laws. They double down on gender dysphoria in kids, despite the science showing that over 80% of kids will grow out of it. Liberals always go to extreme. These laws go too far. People in Toronto get it. New Canadians get it. We have to start doing politics differently. It's time to stand up and speak the truth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sloan. All right, well, now let's move on to our first topic of the evening, which is GTA traffic congestion and public transit investment. So this was the most frequently raised issue in our survey. Our members are frustrated with Toronto traffic jams and with the inadequate subway and other public transit alternatives. Now, we're aware that the principal responsibility for these regional transportation issues lies with the governments of Ontario and Toronto, but our voters are clearly exasperated and they want answers. So what can a conservative federal government do to help solve GTA gridlock? Some big cities use market-based mechanisms. So in London, England, for example, they have a congestion charge to enter the city. Here in Toronto, road pricing tolls were once proposed for the Gardiner Expressway. So what is your view on these kinds of market-based tools? And more generally, do you support a larger federal role to foster development of our subways and Toronto region public transit? So our response order for this question will be Mr. Sloan, Mr. O'Toole, and Dr. Lewis. So Mr. Sloan, over to you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, one of the things that I will address will actually lower the demand for these services by bringing our immigration levels down to sustainable levels. So we have one of the highest levels of immigration in the developed world. I want to reduce our immigration levels from 350,000 people per year to 150,000 people per year. This will place us in line with other developed countries. And you may know this just by living in Toronto, but Toronto has been growing at the fastest rate of any city in North America. In 2018, Toronto grew 3 times faster than the second fastest growing city in North America, which was Phoenix, Arizona. So the researchers are calling the growth stunning. And so part of this issue is dealing with the actual increase of demand. And by changing our immigration rates, we can do that. Obviously, we need to invest in transit infrastructure. Transit is a key issue for urban centers, and the economic cost of congestion is high and growing. The late Mayor Rob Ford did this, and when everyone else was talking about streetcars, he was able to articulate people's frustration, and that frustration has only grown. Before, we had less money, but we were doing more things. Transit infrastructure spending will actually grow the economy, and I would say that all of Infrastructure Canada investment plan stream funding should prioritize subways in major city centers and bus expansion in smaller cities. The Ford government's work on fixing GTA transit after decades of neglect by municipal governments will be challenging because of how much catch-up there is. So I would propose that the feds match provincial investments in the GTA transit and not play politics with the file like Justin Trudeau is. The GTA is now, for some commuters, going out as far as Hamilton, Halton, Milton, Cambridge, the Durham region, of course. An expanded GO service to these areas is a good start, but we need more frequency. Niagara Falls is a great place for young families. It's much more affordable, but they're only getting 2 trains to Toronto a day. So that's something we can change as well. There are private sector options. I think we need to look at private sector options for building and running more transit options, both trains and buses. You'll remember how Rob Ford utilized this option with garbage collection. East of Yonge Street was government run, and west of Yonge Street was focused on privatization. So as we expand to places like Barrie and Ajax and Milton and beyond, I think we should look at public sector within the 416 and private sector beyond. And whether that's in the form of public-private partnerships or outright privatization, private sector involvement is a key principle that I believe in, and other jurisdictions around the world have seen the speed of transit construction increase while lowering consumer transit costs by unleashing the private sector. That's something we should do as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sloan. Appreciate that. Mr. O'Toole, now it's over to you for a 3-minute response.
Thank you. Yes, this is a #1 issue, and it's a joint issue in both the 416 and the 905. I grew up in the suburbs and then lived across this country in the military. And when my wife was from Nova Scotia and I moved back to Toronto, we lived in the beaches for many years. So I've taken over my life the 501 streetcar daily every day. I've taken the 401 in driving to Yonge and Sheppard. I've taken the Yonge and University lines on a daily basis as a commuter. And it was crazy when in some parts of Toronto, you were over an hour commute on public transit. So we had 40 years of missed infrastructure development. I lived in the beaches. There was always talk of the ghost TTC station on Queen Street because there was a line planned there, but there was never money put into it. So we have to play a bit of catch up. And the way we would do it as Conservatives is not an Ottawa knows best approach. It has to be an approach where we partner with Premier Ford, the provincial government, with the City of Toronto, and with Metrolinx, the agency that's been tasked. I've said repeatedly, I would like to see enhancements and expansion to both the TTC and the GO train. I think the more we integrate those also with Peel and with the surrounding regions, we are a GTA, GTHA region. and there needs to be an integrated approach and a smart approach. There also has to be investments in roads. And you asked directly about tolls, Geoff. I oppose tolls. There'll be a lot of people. I used to commute the GO train from Oshawa to downtown Union every day, like many people. But my wife for a while worked at Rogers in Midtown on Bloor Mount Pleasant. Transit wasn't obviously an option always for everybody. So we can't penalize people that don't live in one of the main hubs or work in one of the main hubs. So the more we have a balance between effective and expanding transit and infrastructure for key roads, that will be options for people. That takes pressure off a system that really 25, 30 years ago, there wasn't the degree of investment that was needed. I was proud in the Harper government to be part of a group that expanded the subways north, that got infrastructure money for the Bloor line increased. I think we can partner with Premier Ford. I've talked to him, the finance minister, and the president of the Treasury Board about just that. We do it as partners in a collaborative fashion, not as an Ottawa knows best. And in the past, Conservatives have also looked at affordability through transit tax credits and other things. That's where I think we can go, being a funding partner and recognizing a priority on investments if it reduces commute times.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. O'Toole, for that response. Dr. Lewis, over to you then for your 3-minute response.
Well, thank you so much. So I think it's important for us to acknowledge that roads and highways are a municipal and provincial responsibility largely, but that the federal government does have a role to play in affecting these projects. It is critical also to realize that the federal government has worked with the provinces in the past and can continue to work with the provinces and municipalities to identify shared priorities and fund these projects in a joint manner that will get our economy moving and have deliverables to the taxpayer. The previous Conservative government also delivered historically high support for municipalities by transferring billions of dollars in tax collected on gasoline taxes. And this was transferred directly to the cities for the purpose of investing in the transportation infrastructure. The gas tax fund has been lauded by mayors countrywide as an important feature to predicting the source of funding for infrastructure projects. And I would like to continue that legacy of previous Conservative governments. In contrast, Justin Trudeau has invested $50 million in China's Asian Infrastructural Investment Bank to improve overseas infrastructure and committed $35 billion to domestic infrastructure. But the difference is that they have been incapable of getting the money to the projects that need it. And so that's why we see some of the gridlock that we're seeing. Our government will actually get that money to the needed projects in the urban centers, in the cities, to fund mass transportation and to fund road development. I will work with the GTA and all provinces and municipalities to make sure that the federal government funds projects that are shovel ready and make a real impact and change in the lives of the people in the GTA and urban centers.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Dr. Lewis. All right, well, before moving on to our second topic, if any of our viewers joined us late, this is the Conservative Party Leadership Forum focused on Toronto urban issues. If you missed any portions of this forum, it is being recorded. We'll post the link on our EDA website so you can catch up later. And please remember, keep yourself muted with your camera disabled at all times. All right, our second biggest topic submitted by our members is crime, and specifically the proliferation of illegal firearms and especially handguns. Our members are also concerned with gangs and organized crime activity in Toronto. So crime in densely populated cities like this is in your face. Toronto has experienced too many mass killings, gang shootings, and other criminal acts. So the question is, do our big cities need different rules for firearm ownership, for instance, a handgun ban? And what is your strategy to combat gang and organized crime activity in our cities? And finally, what is your view on recent calls by some to defund the police and redirect funding to social services? So our order of response for this question will be Mr. O'Toole, Dr. Lewis, and Mr. Sloan. So Mr. O'Toole, over to you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'll start where you left off at the bottom. I think good discussions and important discussions about racism, about brutality or problems in law enforcement and our justice system are important, but I don't think solutions are defunding the police or suggesting that we can't work on programs for at-risk youth or people that are vulnerable and support law enforcement at the same time. I think they're not mutually exclusive. We can and must do both. I've been a big fan of community-based policing, which allows members of the force, whatever force, provincial, municipal, to build trust within communities, particularly communities that may have trust issues with police or a lack of ability to feel that they can contact the police force. They feel detached. Well, community-based approaches really work. I've been advocating for that for many years, including a federal resource for an Aboriginal liaison officer to allow for large municipal forces to have a specialized resource for, in Toronto, off-reserve Indigenous people to build that trust there. But we have to do that across the board. What we see with illegal firearms in the Commission of Crimes in Toronto is Bill Blair's own report, Geoff, says that about almost 85% of guns used in illegal acts are smuggled from the US. What we've seen with Trudeau is the border, as people have been crossing illegally and claiming irregular asylum claims, we've actually seen an increase in smuggling of all types, including firearms. So they're ignoring the real issue and doing what the Liberals do best, which is always suggest that law-abiding firearms owners are somehow the problem here, when their own studies show that illegal guns are getting in the hands of organized crime and of gangs. And so how can we reduce that? We need some specialized work with CBSA, RCMP, and large municipal police forces to crack down on that smuggling problem. The federal government, we are responsible for the border. And sadly, the border has been neglected under the Trudeau government. It's been used politically with tweets and other things. We need to make sure we empower CBSA and try and stop some of the smuggling rings before they come into Canada. Then what we can also do is partner with the work done by Chief Saunders and other large urban police forces on tackling organized crime and gang activity. That is needed. If we defunded the police suddenly, there would be even more crime in some parts of the city that we want to work on better opportunities for people. So let's talk about real solutions more than hashtags. Let's leave the hashtags for the Liberals. Let's try and find real long-term lasting solutions.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Toole, for that response. Over to you, Dr. Lewis, next for your 3-minute response to this question.
Thank you so much. So I believe that firearms laws should keep Canadians safe and get criminals off the street. Our government's action should focus on making sure that guns are kept out of the hands of criminals while respecting law-abiding Canadians. And I believe that what we must do is that we can take illegal firearms off the streets and include stronger security at our borders. The recent OIC ban wasn't achieved democratically. It was implemented through regulations and not legislation. If it were implemented through legislation, that would have required a debate, and we would have seen some more information come out rather than the misinformation that we've heard from the Liberals. Law-abiding firearms owners went to bed as upstanding citizens and woke up as criminals. And I believe that it's wrong to place that stigma on people who have been complying with the laws throughout. I feel that I would repeal the Liberal ban and reroute these resources into tackling firearms, gun smuggling at the borders, invest in vulnerable youth, and invest in fighting gang violence. As a lawyer, I also found the firearms legislation to be very poorly drafted and confusing. And I feel that it should be, we need to look at the entire legislation again and make sure that it meets the public safety objective. I also feel that we need to just review the entire legislation and make sure that we're addressing issues of public safety and security and not labeling law-abiding gun owners. Finally, I feel that the approach that we've taken to defunding the police, I believe that that is not the way to go. That a society that seeks to instill good laws must have a means and an institution of enforcing those laws. And when we see police officers, these are the individuals that are running towards violence while we are running away from it. They're running towards danger to protect us. And it must be very demoralizing for police officers to wake up every morning, put on their uniform, leave their homes, and know that there's a movement to defund them. And so I believe that what we should be doing is we should be looking to weed out the bad apples in the police force and support the good ones and make sure and work together to improve our police force and not to destroy it.
Very good. Thank you very much, Dr. Lewis. Mr. Sloan, it's your opportunity to respond. You have 3 minutes.
Well, to start with the topic of firearms, I'm against Trudeau's gun grab, full stop. And I believe that instead of banning guns from legal gun owners, they should be able to use those guns for self-defense. And I have a great gun policy that expands rights for legal firearms owners and it enshrines in law the right to use a firearm judiciously for self-defense. You can check out a webinar I did on that topic with the CCFR. You can look that up on YouTube if you like. And we can win on this issue. We can drive the narrative. There are many small business owners, for example, particularly convenience store owners, who should be able to defend themselves. And in my own riding, there was someone who owned a convenience store. They're an immigrant from Korea, and they almost lost their life a little over a year ago in a senseless attack on business. And he should have been able to defend himself. And these are the types of things we can win on the gun narrative if we're tough on crime and we tell people the facts. We should be spending Trudeau's billion-dollar rifle buyback on border patrols to end smuggling. And we need to bring back Harper's mandatory minimums on gang crime. Gangs almost always use illegal firearms. And the first charge, unfortunately, to be thrown out many times is the weapons charge. We need to direct our Crown prosecutors not to make plea deals in regards to weapons. So, this also involves more resources for frontline policing involving gangs. As far as defunding the police, I will not defund the police. Antifa and other groups are pushing this defund the police agenda to further their aim of anarchy and civil disruption. As Prime Minister, I will classify Antifa a terrorist organization, and I'm the only candidate that has made this commitment. Of course, defunding the police will hurt inner city communities the most, and we see this in the United States. Police are already moving back on patrol duty, and minorities are dying. Business owners from attacks in the streets, and there's more inner city violence as well. Another issue we have in Toronto, property theft and property crimes are given very little attention in Toronto. That's because there's only so much money to go around. So we need to have more money for investigating property crimes, auto theft, and monitoring places like the Concord Rail Terminal to discover stolen cars and other things that are being transported. We need to do a review of the Youth Criminal Justice Act. It's been about 20 years since we've done that. We need to take a look at what some other jurisdictions are doing. Sometimes they're taking young people, putting them in separate communities for a couple of years to learn new skills. So these are the types of things. We also need to increase manpower. And if we take a look at the broken window policy that Mayor Giuliani used to clean up New York, we can make inroads. And I've heard that the manpower on the streets in Toronto is not enough, and we need to up the funding for that. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Sloan, for that response. All right, now let's move on to our third topic, addressing our most economically vulnerable Toronto citizens, including seniors, low-income families, and the homeless. So Etobicoke has one of the largest seniors populations in the country. And despite our overall prosperity, Toronto unfortunately still has too many people living in poverty, including a relatively large homeless population. We're all concerned to live in a compassionate society, and a measure of our success is how we treat our least fortunate citizens. So, for example, some have suggested bundling our patchwork of government support programs for the underprivileged Canadians into a guaranteed annual income. So the question for our candidates is, what are your policies to improve conditions for our most vulnerable citizens? So our response order for this question will be Mr. Sloan, Mr. O'Toole, and Dr. Lewis. So back to you, Mr. Sloan, for your 3-minute response.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And you know, I've said for quite some time that Conservatives need to have really good answers for these questions, because these are issues that are on the top of people's minds, and we need to have a great way to come at these things from a Conservative perspective. So as best I can in a couple of minutes, I'll deal with some of the issues here. I won't be able to touch on everything, but I do think that these questions are very important. They're outside of the ambit of maybe the typical Conservative issues, you know, national defense and the economy, but these are also very important. So, you know, what we're seeing with the way seniors are being treated at long-term care homes is very troubling. And you know, I think it's time we put more money into our seniors. There's a lot of things that Trudeau is funding from an ideological perspective. Foreign abortions, the World Health Organization, his media bailout. These things alone cost over $2 billion. And these are the types of things we need to get rid of. I've said we need to get rid of all of those, and we can put that type of money into helping Canadians, such as our seniors and our lower income families. You know, there's not enough respect for the sanctity of life. And I want to promote a culture of life that respects and upholds the dignity of all Canadians, young, old, preborn, or approaching the end of life. And there's a variety of different special interest groups that I think we should defund as well. Palliative care is very important in the seniors context. Justin Trudeau has promised several times to increase palliative care and has not done so. So I believe we need to put in significant investments into palliative care to help the most vulnerable. I think we need to look very closely at the expansion of euthanasia. I believe with the expansion of palliative care, we will give people an option to choose life and comfortable living rather than euthanasia. I don't believe that we should expand euthanasia to deal with people who are not about to die, or to deal with minors or people who are mentally ill. And it's also important that we respect the rights of conscience for people who are working in the health industry as well. So when it comes to seniors, not only do we have to deal with long-term care, but we do need to deal with senior poverty. And poverty is an issue. You know, how many times now are we seeing seniors manning the greeting line there at Walmart? I mean, we're having an epidemic of seniors who do not have money to retire, and I think we're at an unusual time for that. I don't think we've ever seen it like that before. So we need to think about things like increasing OAS and GIS supplements for seniors in need, things of that nature. I only have a few seconds left here, so I'll just talk a little bit about protecting unborn victims of crime. With the laws that we have right now, pregnant women who are targeted, there's no additional penalty for killing the preborn baby. We need to deal with stuff like that. I got many more things to say, but I'm not going to go over time. Thank you so much for hearing me tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sloan, for that, and I thank you for respecting the time limit very much. Mr. O'Toole, over to you for your 3-minute response.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. And you asked specifically about guaranteed annual income. I do not support a guaranteed annual income. And many of the people that advocate for it don't understand what it would do to the economic free market landscape. We've actually already seen the emergency response benefit, the CERB, impact employment opportunities in communities, particularly when Justin Trudeau expanded the CERB by $9 billion or so to encourage students not to try and find work. So already businesses across the GTA, I've been speaking to many of them, can't find entry-level hospitality, service, retail type positions because there's been a negative incentive to actually go on the CERB. So it would be a real change to our workplace culture and the sort of character of our country if we had a program that encouraged or allowed able-bodied people to not work, as opposed to an insurance-based system to catch them if there was a life event or lost their job. So I do think the patchwork system, as you described it, is much better because it's meant to address self-sufficiency, allowing those people that can work to have success, and then filling in the gaps when there's challenges. That's what we need to do, not to change the culture and value behind hard work. On seniors, a month and a half ago, I was in the House of Commons and I asked the Trudeau government that despite the billions Trudeau was spending every day in front of his cottage, why there had not been an OAS one-time supplement for the COVID situation, given the pressures. I'm happy to say 3 weeks later, the government announced that. My question in the House led to a response. It shows the role of opposition and why it's shameful that Justin Trudeau has been trying to avoid parliamentary scrutiny as he spends $250 billion. We've already made some of the emergency response benefits, including to seniors, more available. I was also encouraging early on for our military medics and healthcare branch to be able to help in the health and long-term care systems where eventually they did go to help. I think also in terms of homelessness, the vulnerable, food banks, we need to partner. Ottawa doesn't always know best. Municipal governments are closer to the ground. Service organizations like Lions and Rotary, and I know there's a proud heritage in Etobicoke in West Toronto of service organizations, faith organizations. They were often the first ones to create Nellie Shelter, that create the Feed the Need food bank. So I think what we need to do is how can government partner and empower local organizations to tackle some of our social challenges. It's a great country initiative. It's in my platform at aaronotoole.ca. Check it out.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Dr. Lewis, it's your turn up. You have 3 minutes to respond.
Thank you. So one of the pillars of my campaign is to have real practical and compassionate policies to help the vulnerable, and that includes seniors and low-income Canadians. So the guaranteed annual income for seniors, veterans, and disability is actually a viable tool because these individuals are not in the workforce, and so they would not pose any impediment to employers getting individuals to fulfill the jobs. We need to make sure that if a guaranteed income program is applied, that it's not a disincentive to work. And that is why I believe that it should be limited to seniors, veterans, and disabled people, individuals who are not in the workforce. I have to say that I was very disgusted by the reports of the care conditions in long-term senior residents, and I'm sure many Canadians were. But it didn't really take a pandemic for me to realize that our government has not been treasuring our elderly. And throughout my travels, I've had many conversations with people who have told me that they have felt pressured by care providers to euthanize their elderly parents. And this is a very, very serious concern because we have lost respect for the sanctity of life. And once death becomes a viable option for care, it is no surprise that the standard will fall so low as what we've seen in the past few weeks in those facilities. Our parents and our grandparents built this great country, and we owe them we owe them the honor to respect them and to make sure that they're cared for in their later days. With respect to other areas such as the youth, I believe that we have to have policies to make sure that the youth do not also fall into poverty. Young people now are graduating from school and competing with their parents and their aunts and uncles for work. We need to make sure we have mass transportation, we build affordable housing, that we have trades and jobs training, and that we fund schools properly, and that we have community level involvement and training programs in the schools to help children transition, to help young people transition to the workforce. I also believe that for young income Canadians, we have to bring jobs back to Canada, and we have to make sure that that we have jobs that they can turn to, and also help reduce homeless problem. Many homeless individuals do not have an address to put on a resume, and so we have to solve that problem first. And I believe that my policy of the Housing First strategy deals with the issues of unemployment. It deals with making sure an individual has a home first before we can address other issues such as mental health issues. So all of these factors together, we need to address various vulnerable sectors in our society and deal with issues of poverty from these various sectors.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lewis. Okay, candidates, we're going to now move on to our fourth topic tonight, which is the state of our battered economy and how are we going to reinvigorate economic activity and support businesses in their recovery. So we're all aware the COVID-19 lockdown has had a particularly hard impact on small businesses. When you walk along the major commercial streets in our Etobicoke riding, like Lakeshore Boulevard or the Queensway or Bloor Street, you see all the closed restaurants and shops, all the small businesses forced to shut down. Our members raised serious concerns about how they're going to get back in business. Plus, the federal deficit is now likely to exceed $250 billion, and the national debt is simply exploding. So all of this constrains our ability for future fiscal stimulus. So the tough question for our candidates is, what fiscal and other levers are you proposing to use to revitalize the Canadian economy? So our response order for this question will be Dr. Lewis, Mr. O'Toole, and Mr. Sloan. So Dr. Lewis, it's right back to you for 3 minutes.
Thank you. So one of the saddest things actually COVID is witnessing individuals not being able to celebrate milestones, be there for family members, visit their dying family members, attend weddings. Many university students didn't get to attend an official graduation ceremony. And now they're also going out into the workforce and potentially being unemployed and competing, as I said before, with parents, aunts, and uncles for jobs. So there are several initiatives that I would undertake as leader of the party and prime minister of this country. One of my first policies is to make sure that we stimulate small and medium-sized businesses, which employ over 80% of all Canadians. We need a long-term plan to phase out our deficit, to cut red tape, and to make it easier for businesses to function. We are currently, as a society, consuming more than we're producing. We need to up our production, bring home the essential goods, services, and provide tax incentives to companies to make affordable manufacturing products such as medical supplies, including gloves, respirators, and masks. These supplies are national security issues, and we should be able to produce them within this country. We need to protect and support our key manufacturing sector, and including also our agriculture and food processing industries. Canada needs to be self-sufficient in times of crisis. We need policies to encourage investments in infrastructure to get our products to local and export markets. And that means improving on our rail transport, our roads, our bridges, our port systems. I would also temporarily reduce the HST on the hardest hit industries, such as restaurants and hotels and tourist businesses. I also believe that we need to develop our energy and natural resource sector in an environmentally sustainable manner. And that may mean giving full tax credits on capital investment in new equipments, on machinery and technology applications that have environmental technology benefits. And it may also include farmers and oil and manufacturers in the oil and gas sector. Those should not be excluded also if there's an environmental stewardship component. I also feel that we should restore confidence in the stability of our government through long-term investments in upholding the rule of law. We need to bring back companies that have left our country because concerns over the rule of law because of unfavorable legislation such as Bill C-48 and Bill C-69. I would repeal those legislations, and the funds that the revenues that we would gain from the oil and gas sector, we could use those to pay down our national debt and reduce our deficits. I believe that we should bring investors back to Canada. We need to create a strong regulatory framework. We need policies such as income splitting for couples to allow Canadians to get back on their feet and to have more money in their pockets.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lewis. Mr. O'Toole, over to you for 3 minutes.
Thank you. This is probably the most important question of the night, because before COVID-19, when I launched my campaign in Calgary as a GTA MP, but Calgary because of the national unity crisis, we thought we were facing the structural $20 billion deficit that we've seen, give or take, from Justin Trudeau for 4 years. Now we're facing $250 billion. And before that, we already saw Tech Resources pull an investment out of Canada, Warren Buffett pull his investment out of Canada, and jobs in decline and a lack of competitiveness. GM in Oshawa, in my area, the last car rolled off the line in December. So there's already a crisis. We have to have a plan that has two parts. Get spending under control over a period of time. It will take a number of years because of the size of the deficit, and rebuild the private sector in Canada. My Rebuild Canada plan has a rebuilding, a restoring of our reputation internationally, and real help for families, seniors, and small business. 2/3 of Canadians do work for a small and medium-sized enterprise, and they were largely left out of all of Trudeau's COVID responses. They didn't, owner-operators didn't qualify for the emergency business account. They didn't get any rent assistance. Hardly any businesses have received any form of rent assistance. They ignored our requests to remit GST and other payments to give businesses cash flow. So we could see a cascading series of insolvencies in the fall. That's why I've said we need to change bankruptcy and insolvency legislation, extend the business loans to businesses that didn't qualify, and even come up with our federal agencies, BDC and EDC, to extend financing to a smaller, medium-sized businesses restructuring. We don't want them to liquidate and fire everyone. We want them to restructure and survive for employment, because as we drop down all the programs, we need people to be working in this country, to have productivity, to have value, and that will be core to our platform. I also have a new hire credit by small businesses dropping their EI premium if they hire over the course of a year. There's a number of things we can do to make sure the small business environment, whether it's in Etobicoke-Lakeshore or any of the communities in the GTA, they need to be firing on all cylinders for local economic activity and employment. And then we have to tackle the major issues, the oil and gas situation out west. I have a 100-day plan for that. We need an agreement for softwood lumber with the United States. I worked on trade as a lawyer and in the Harper government. We need to rebalance global trade and box out China, which has been gaming World Trade Organization. We should be working with the US, the UK, and others, except Trudeau's not at the table because they know he just wants to talk about his socks. So my plan at aaronotoole.ca, it's called Our Country, A Plan to Take Back Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Toole. All right, now over to you, Mr. Sloan. You have 3 minutes.
Well, thank you for that. And as a former small business owner, I am well aware of the ways in which made in Canada and Canadian manufacturing have been decimated over the last several decades. And a lot of that has to do with being aligned, like Aaron has said, with countries that play by different rules, that flood our market with inferior products, China for one. And we need to get back to a made in Canada approach. We also need to cut federal spending, and we need to cut taxes to encourage innovation and growth. There is no recovery in Canada without a healthy oil and gas industry. And I'm the only candidate that's committed to taking Canada out of the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement has as its goal net carbon neutral, carbon zero, as its aspirational goal by the second half of this century. So that is a goal to shut down our energy industry, and that is something that we cannot do. So I have said no to the Paris Agreement. And another issue that's impacting our energy industry is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And that is something that the Trudeau government is seeking over and over again to enshrine into law. And it will make it that much harder to get energy projects through, energy projects that most of the time Indigenous people want and provide good paying jobs for our Indigenous communities. So we need to make sure that we have a way for our Indigenous communities to say yes. And we saw the same issue with the Coastal GasLink project. When it comes to getting back to balanced budgets, we have to buck the narrative that it's okay to run structural deficits. We have to hold the line on spending. We have to get rid of the deficit. And there are so many things the government's spending money on that's wasteful. I mentioned some things earlier, but there are many things that we can do to reform our spending at the federal level. We have to be investing in Canada. We should be investing in infrastructure projects, shovel-ready projects, and other projects that require some time. The recovery will take some time, but we do have to make sure that we're investing in Canada. I have a variety of different small business plans as well, and some of the other candidates have similar ideas. I do believe we need to eliminate the GST on the hardest hit industries for the next year, so restaurants and hotels. And I also will allow Canadians to make a $30,000 tax-free withdrawal from their RRSPs for 2 years. And this is an immediate and cheap source of financial assistance for Canadians that are suffering from the pandemic's fallout. I also believe that we need to reduce payroll taxes. This is, as I know, these sort of taxes are a tax and they suck away at operating cash flow. So we need to get rid of, or we need to give our businesses a break on some of these payroll taxes. We need to increase our TFSA limits to $10,000, and we need to provide more support to municipalities and provinces in the international money markets to get the funding that they need. Thank you very much.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Sloan. All right, folks, our next topic raised by our members is the environment and climate change. But our members didn't want to talk about carbon taxes. They wanted to focus on the natural environment in our big cities. So the fact is, densely populated urban areas pose unique environmental pressures. So the question for our candidates is, beyond carbon taxes, how does the GTA continue to grow without exacerbating our carbon footprint? And moreover, which components of Canada's urban environments require the most urgent federal action, and what federal tools would you use to address these issues? So our order of responses for this question are Mr. Sloan, Dr. Lewis, and Mr. O'Toole. So Mr. Sloan, it's right back to you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Well, you know, I'm glad you raised those issues, because what I believe the Conservative Party has to do is they need to be the champion of actual solutions to deal with environmental issues. And the carbon tax, of course, is not a solution. It's an ideological crutch. We can differentiate ourselves from the Liberals on the environmental file by having some real ideas that impact the environment. And I've said that since the last election. During the last election, we actually had a decent plan, but we didn't talk about it much. We kind of just said, well, yeah, we have a plan too, and it's good, trust us. But we didn't differentiate the fact that we are not climate alarmists. And I believe that the true Conservative position is one of environmental stewardship. And I believe that we need to distinguish ourselves from climate alarmism. And, you know, there's a lot of ideas out there, you know, that some of the more extreme people are saying, oh, you know, if we don't do anything right now, the planet will be destroyed in 10 years or 20 years or whatever number of years. We have to say, look, we're going to focus on what we can focus on, and that is doing real things to help the environment. So carbon sequestration, liquid natural gas, nuclear energy, these are things that can lower our emissions. We need to highlight local needs like water sewage. We don't even have enough funding for our local municipalities to treat the water that they're using. And there's millions of liters that are dumped into the St. Lawrence every year, water that's been untreated, sewage essentially. And, you know, focusing on reducing landfill waste, focus on reducing plastic waste. I have a company in my own riding that can take plastic waste and turn it into pavement. These are the types of things, and you know, and this pavement lasts longer, has better, deals with heat better, has better flexibility. These are the types of things that we can focus on in our plan to differentiate ourselves. And there's many things like that we can do. Like I said, I want to get us out of the Paris Agreement. I think that agreement handcuffs us when it comes to our natural resource projects. and it keeps us from doing what's best for Canada. So as we're dealing with a real environmental plan, we also have to defund these radical groups. The Tides Foundation, which now goes by the name of Make Way, they paid people to door knock in the 2015 election in key ridings to beat Stephen Harper. These are groups that are funded sometimes by oil companies from other countries. We need to defund these radical groups. We need to figure out where their money is coming from, and we need to make it known that they cannot be involved in influencing our electoral outcomes. So I've sent out some emails. I've listed several organizations that I would target, and some of them we fund ourselves with our own federal money. So these are things that we need to do. Thank you for hearing me out tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. So Dr. Lewis, over to you. You have 3 minutes.
So thank you very much. The Liberals have adopted Stephen Harper's emission targets, and this is the Paris targets. And then they've actually bragged about the fact that they are doing things better than the Conservatives have done, have approached the environment. We've set policies that meets our targets and that has also developed our economy. And I do disagree with Mr. Sloan. The Paris Accord is an international agreement. Sovereign countries voluntarily sign on to the accord. It does not impact on our national laws. We structure our laws. If we've had bad laws, that is a product of our own demise. Bill C-48 and Bill C-69 were laws that were brought in that were detrimental to our economy, but they were not compelled by the Paris Accord. We are an independent sovereign nation. So it is a misnomer to think that an international agreement like the Paris Accord actually constrains our laws. It does not. We are the curators of our own demise when it comes to national resource development. So I want that fact to be out there and not spew misinformation. With respect to winning the next election, I believe that Conservatives have to find a credible challenge to Trudeau with respect to the environment. And I have a plan for a greener Canada, which includes responsible resource development. It includes encouraging green investment in renovations and also funding conservationist practices. I believe that the environment needs to be incorporated in all aspects of our policies. And we have the ability to positively impact on not only our local environment, but our environment abroad. For example, the potential of Canadian liquefied natural gas exports is immense, and we can export our liquefied natural gas to places like China, who are still dependent on coal usage. In addition, we should provide tax incentives and credits to corporations that can innovate and adapt environmentally friendly technology to their businesses. And we should incentivize businesses to find green solutions that will reduce emissions in a meaningful way. We should also invest in green mass transit to help our transport issues, but also the environment. I would also launch a national environmental education program that teaches people how to conserve, because conservation is the biggest source of lowering emissions. Conserving and restoring our environment does not have to be expensive. It can be simple steps like planting trees. Better recycling programs also go a long way. I want to help improve Canadians divert 100% of plastics from landfill use into recycling plastic products right here in Canada.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lewis. Okay, so now over to you, Mr. O'Toole, to respond to this question. You have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Jeff. You started off by saying you wanted some specific things for the city and confined spaces. And I think smart planning is one of the best ways to go. When I was working downtown in the core on Bay Street, the N-Wave development, which I got to know, was a great example of smart planning, district heating, deep water, lake cooling for the downtown core, taking pressures off the system. And that type of smart planning can be done as the GTA grows. And the second thing that we can do is direct transit investment. The more pressure we take off the roads means less roads over time, and greener, less emissions from transport. It's not about banning the car or having a war on the car. It's about smart options that allow people to get to work. And as possible, if they can take public transit, the federal government can be a funding partner. And I think we're also very proud in Ontario that with nuclear power and with hydro, we have 2/3 of our electricity generated in Southern Ontario by GHG-free sources. So as Southern Ontario grows, both from an industrial load standpoint and residential, we should be very happy, because the biggest challenge with climate change globally is actually the burning of coal to generate electricity. And as Ontario, which was 0.03 of the world, went off the grid, we saw growth in China, Vietnam, Indonesia, etc. I have a very detailed environmental plan in this leadership contest, the most detailed because I campaigned across the GTA, including in Etobicoke for our candidates. And one of the main reasons we lost is voters that were open to our economic message didn't think we had a serious environmental platform. We've got brand damage from that from 2015 and 2019 because the Liberals, the NDP, the Green, the Toronto Star all described us as deniers, and we weren't fighting back. I will fight back with an approach that has a serious plan, that partners with the work that Doug Ford is doing in Ontario, Jason Kenney. We have to respect provincial plans, which are closer to the local economies. If they're stepping down emissions, how can we partner with them to do that? And then with key federal investments, whether in technology, transit, smarter regulations to take fewer truckers off the road through cabotage and a series of other smart moves, we can get our emissions down, not with a tax. I'll kill Trudeau's carbon tax, but with smart policies, partnering with provinces and working with emitters to get their emissions down without disrupting economic growth. That has to be our goal for our kids, for winning. I worked on the environment as a lawyer, both for Procter & Gamble and with renewable projects across Ontario. I will win back that brand, and if we do, we win the next election.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. All right, folks, our final topic tonight addresses electability of the Conservative Party in the Toronto context and our election strategy for GTA ridings. So Toronto's large population is unique in Canada. It's a magnet for immigrants. So many people of numerous ethnicities live here. We have a very large and proud LGBTQ+ community. I mean, the fact is that Toronto is one of the world's most diverse large cities, and we celebrate that. And yet the Conservative Party's efforts in the last election failed in Toronto and the wider GTA. So the question to our candidates is, why did we do so poorly here? And more importantly, looking forward, what is your strategy to attract more Toronto voters to the Conservative Party and elect more Conservative MPs? So for this final segment, our response order will be Mr. O'Toole, Dr. Lewis, and Mr. Sloan. So Mr. O'Toole, it's back to you. You have 3 minutes.
You for moderating, and all the Etobicoke-Lakeshore organizers behind this event, and to all of you for taking part. I'm very proud to be a GTA Conservative MP. Yes, there are a few of us, but we need to grow the team, and that's why I'm running. I would be the first leader from Ontario selected since 1948, the first who has a seat in the GTA ever. And so I think we can do it with a principled Conservative. I've won in the GTA 3 times, not by pretending I'm liberal, but by defending our principles and growing our tent, making sure that more Canadians, new Canadians, more professional women, the members of the LGBTQ community, if they share our values of free market principles, liberty, respect for the rule of law, opportunity for all, a principled Canada in the world stage, we need to welcome them in our movement. And in fact, when you look across the 416 and 905, some of the first generation small business owners that voted for Trudeau, he's had a war on small business. He called them tax cheats. He left them out of their COVID response. We will enlist them in the cause, grow our movement based on our principles to win. That's what I've done 3 times in the GTA. I won in the fall by over 7,000 votes, and I have been a principled supporter of of law-abiding firearms owners, of the private sector, of the resource sector, of free speech, of our big conservative movement. We have to unite and respect all parts of our movement and then grow in the areas we need to win. And that's the 416 and the 905. I've spoken personally about how we have to show we have ideas for the future, particularly on the environment, on issues like Indigenous reconciliation, on issues like homelessness and other ones. We have to show that conservatives, we care, and we have a principled approach to any public policy issue that a voter in Etobicoke, Durham, North York, Milton wants to talk about. I want to make sure we have amazing candidates who have a policy full of principled approaches to rebuild Canada. I know we can do it, and I'm asking for your support. My platform, Our Country, A Call to Take Back Canada, please check it out at aaronotoole.ca and join my mission to make sure we win where we need to win in the 416 and the 905. If we do, we will bring our conservative movement back to government. So join me in this fight. Let's take back Canada. Thank you very much to all of you for joining, and to my friends Leslyn and Derek for taking part. I wish there was a fourth here, but it's unfortunate he's not.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Toole. Dr. Lewis, over to you for your final remarks. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much for moderating this session tonight. And I thank each and every one on this call tonight just for this opportunity for me to share my vision and to answer your questions. If we want to win the next election and get different results, we need to do things differently. Obviously, the GTA is a key battleground in every election, but the next election is different because we know in advance that we cannot win without winning the large urban centers. I believe that I'm the best candidate to help us grow that voter base and win the GTA. I can connect with new Canadians, existing conservatives, and new Canadians understand my experience is coming here as an immigrant when I was 5 years old. And my success story is really a part of the Canadian dream. I have the ability to draw in people from diverse backgrounds. And I've seen this on my own campaign, where we have, for the first time, new conservatives taking out memberships solely to support me. In the GTA, due to my volunteer involvement. I've volunteered in prisons, counseling youth, at high schools, in women's shelters, and many organizations, and have won volunteer awards for my participation in this community. The GTA has so many small businesses. I can connect with small business owners. I understand the struggle of keeping a business going during COVID and during the last recession. I understand having to refinance my home to make payroll, to keep my employees from not losing their job in the last recession. I also relate to suburban moms in the 905. I understand the demands of balancing work and family. And in my case, teaching at the university while simultaneously running a business and being a student myself, finishing my PhD while helping my children with their homework. Conservatives across the country are counting on the next leader to be able to win the urban centers and the GTA. When I speak to conservatives in Alberta, they tell me how important it is to win the GTA, and they identify me as somebody with the capability to be able to do that. I also have a unique ability to garner support from all conservatives, and I'm a unifier. Social conservatives, fiscal conservatives, progressive conservatives, and libertarians all support my candidacy. I have no hidden agenda. I'm a trusted person that will unite the party. And at this point in our party's history, we need a messenger with the right message, one that can withstand the liberal attacks about who we are as Canadians. We are a good people. I believe that I can defend Canadian values, build a strong economy, protect the vulnerable, protect the environment, because I am the right messenger at the right time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lewis. Okay, Mr. Sloan, you've drawn the lucky straw with the last word. It's over to you for 3 minutes.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to the other two candidates, Erin O'Toole and Dr. Leslie Lewis, for being here. Always good to see them. We didn't win in this last election because we didn't have a bold vision for Canada. We campaigned on a narrow campaign of boutique tax credits. And that's not the type of thing that turns people on. People want a vision for the country. They want to know that someone who's speaking to them is speaking straight from the heart, is speaking about putting Canada first, and will never compromise no matter what when it comes to Canadians and putting Canada first. Another thing that we can't forget is when we're reaching out to the GTA and the 905, new Canadians, immigrant communities have a strong sense of family values. They when push comes to shove, or if they don't have particular views one way or the other, they're inclined to vote Liberal for different reasons. But if we can distinguish ourselves on values, we can gain ground in these communities. Remember how well Doug Ford did in the GTA when he campaigned on reversing the sex ed curriculum of Kathleen Wynne. And we also have the example of Stephen Harper, who won his 2011 majority after cutting funding for international abortions as well. So it's possible to gain on the values front, and I believe it's an entirely untapped resource for us and something that comes naturally to our party. It's time for us to do politics differently. We've been playing it safe for too long, and we're ceding more and more ground to the left. We have to fight the Liberals on toe-to-toe with their falsehoods. They campaign on division. They campaign on identity politics and other controversial issues. We have to fight back against this political correctness that we're seeing. And I'm the only candidate that is pledged to get rid of C-16, or at least actively campaigning. I believe Leslyn actually has said that as well. But C-16, remember, this is the bill that got Jordan Peterson catapulted to fame. And this is something that impinges on free speech. It impinges on parental sovereignty. It takes away women's sex-based rights. I mean, even J.K. Rowling is writing about this stuff. If J.K. Rowling can talk about it, we can talk about it. So we need to repeal that bill, and we need to do other things to promote free speech. And I have a plan that deals with universities and dealing with banning on social media. We also have to be an example of that within our own party. And we've seen, even in this leadership race, examples of other candidates that have been kicked out. And I really don't think that's fair. We had Richard Decarie, who's a longtime conservative, Jim Carahalios, who's done a lot to fight the carbon tax here in Ontario. These things are unfortunate, and they should not be happening in a party that champions free speech. So I'm against the cancel culture that we see within and without our party. We have to go big. We have to go bold. We can't be afraid to be conservative, and I will never step down or back down when it comes to putting Canadians first. You have my word. God bless you. God bless Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sloan. Well, this brings us to the end of our Urban Issues Leadership Forum. So we wish to thank our viewers for watching and listening. Remember that each Conservative Party member has a vote in this leadership race, and each vote matters very much to determine the outcome, with very high stakes for the country. So we hope that what you've heard at this event tonight helps you decide how to cast that important vote. And of course, a huge thanks to our leadership candidates for joining us this evening, providing your very thoughtful responses to our urban topics. So one of our candidates will soon be Conservative Party leader, and we expect that person, whoever it is, will go on to earn the votes of Canadians and be elected Prime Minister. So it's an enormous responsibility that one of you will be taking on. And we commend the hard work you're very clearly putting in to this vital leadership contest. So again, thank you to our candidates and good luck to you all. And finally, to our viewers, please be sure to mail in your votes for the August 21st leadership election. So that concludes our event tonight. Thank you very much all, and good night.